You can, all right. I think we're pretty safe to say, let's on paper lock in the September 12th and 13th for Kenosha area.
And potentially dinner on the 11th.
All right,
Great,
thank you very much. We appreciate it, Jane.
sure, looking forward to it.
Other discussions you want to have? Or- Nope.
The rest of them are.
Okay. Bear with me as I scroll through the board book as I come back and forth.
Could you just remind me when he is the governor's comments afterwards?
You arrive on if you attend the whole thing, you arrive on a Sunday, it's an opening, reception. And then Monday is when the conference itself is sessions, so it's all day Monday, all day Tuesday, in the afternoon of Tuesday. Rather than going to a breakout, we go into, for the second session of breakouts, we go into our board meeting, it's an abbreviated board meeting, it's 90 minutes. And then we go into the closing gala as part of it and represent the arts at that.
Great. So just to understand what Brian said, it's as much of it as you can do. So the most important Tuesday, meeting is Monday, Tuesday, and if you can get there Sunday.
Yeah, you understand as a professor, it may not always work into your schedule, and so this has remained an option, right?
And it is where next year, sir?
Lacrosse. Yeah, for new conventions, whether new or remodeled or something conventions, remodeled, yeah.
So, see if I understood, we arrive on the 9th and then our meeting's on the 11th,
Yes,
and that night of the meeting is
Yeah.
the day.
And we generally have a meal on Monday nights together, so. If you can't come in for Monday's program, getting in before the evening allows you to participate in that.
Last year they did something interesting where they had us talk in some very quick conversations with the conference attenders in the afternoon, starting at 2:30 or something like that. So there was actually a session before the gala. I don't know that they will do that again, but that's something they played with us.
all right, any more logistics questions?
The Madison, is that a full day then, if we're thinking of
It's
doing
our-
some site visits?
It could be if we're doing site visits, yes.
By then? I may have to miss that, because that's the day before, the Dutch Fargo concert, so last one.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to the panel chair assignments. Tyler is the new member. And for the public, any public that are listening, these panel chair assignments are arts board members who chair the panel sessions where we do the majority of our fiduciary work, which is getting the grant dollars away. And we've got incredible committees, individuals who have volunteered their time to read through incredible grants and make recommendations, at which point comes back to the board, and we ask that the committee chair, along with the staff member of the arts board who that's part of their discipline, whether it's Karen or Caitlin, speak on what occurred, what takeaways they have, what concerns panelists may have had as they read through, in any ways that we can improve the process. And so they're great opportunities to get a better understanding of the discipline of arts and what is out there. The quickest and the one that is approaching us the quickest, and the one that is probably one of the hardest just due to scale and scope, is creation and presentation, and that one is coming up in November, either the 21st or the 22nd. And is there anyone who would like to volunteer themselves to chair that panel? And then we'll need a backup as well. So someone who says, I can do this, and then someone says, if they can't, I can. Knowing that you have the right through Zoom or in person, if you want to learn more, to attend these, you just are just an observer. And I should say, I mean, Tyler, we talked a little bit about this, and since you're the newest to the board, is Our role really is as timekeeper, as custodian of the meeting, along with the arts board staff member. There are some very formal things we must do, but you really are making sure that each grant applicant has the same amount of time of dialogue, and then calling for the scoring, et cetera, and then moving the meeting along and trying to keep it on text. So that's really the form and function of it, besides just having your ears open and really listening to what's being said.
It's all day commitments.
It is.
And although they don't always last all day, it's important to have that piece in your calendar. The other thing about CNP is that we have the full-on panel for the day via Zoom, on discipline, and then we also have a shorter, usually 2 hour Zoom panel meeting on another date to handle all the new applicants from different disciplines that come in. Ideally, the same panel chair that chairs one chairs the other. That hasn't always worked, and sometimes that 2 hour snippet, if you're the backup and the main, and the initial whatever chair can't do it, that 2 hour snippet is a nice taste of what chairing a panel is like, is. And we haven't set the date for that one yet.
All right, we have Bill Mitchell is willing to chair that. Is there someone willing to be a backup? Chella, thank you very much. All right, we will move on now to the Woodland Indian Arts Program. And that is March 4th or the 6th.
Yes, and we know that Karen Ann is going to likely be the chair, but we do need a backup.
I'd be willing
Len?
to back up.
Thank you very much, Len. We're now going to move into the creative communities. We have a panel chair for arts and education. Dinora has already put name forward. John, are you interested in being back up on that one?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, so we've got Dinora and John Johnson. And that is April 30th, and then local arts, and these are, okay, local arts would be May 1st. Someone to,
Like that, if you don't have somebody else.
thank you, Jane. Is there someone willing to be a backup for local arts? Thank you, Susan. For folk arts and folk arts apprenticeships. I'll raise my hand for that one if no one, but I want to make it available to other people. I've done this one a number of times, so I would again, if there's someone who is interested. You want to do that? Perfect. Tyler, and then I will be Tyler's backup. Thank you very much for jumping in there right away. Okay, thank you guys very much for being willing and getting through that so quickly, and for me not having to appoint people to do that versus you guys nominating or volunteering. So thank you very much. We will jump now into our standing committee reports, and the first one I'm going to go to is our nominating committee to Jennifer, where it's the election of the nominating committee.
Hi. So I'm sorry, my dog wants to talk all of a sudden. So I'm putting forth the slate of the nominating committee. As of right now, it is just me and Susan. Well, I'm the chair, and then Susan Lip, since Mary is no longer on the board. And I don't know if we want to look to have someone else added to that, or if we just wait right now. I look to you guys for the guidance on that one.
Is someone willing to volunteer their time? Lynn Ritchie. Lynn has joined your committee.
Yeah. And
Excellent.
Yes, and so if we can have a motion to elect, can we do them all at once, all three members?
Yeah.
Motion to elect the nominating committee of Jennifer Schwarzkopf, Susan Lip, and Lynn Ritchie. Is there a motion?
Motion?
Thank you, Dinah. Is there a motion? John Johnson, second. So a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in, are you, yes, do you have a question, Jane? You're muted.
Yes, I didn't hear who made the motion.
Marquez.
Dinah.
Oh, thanks.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much.
All right, and before we move on, in the board book, you will see that I gave you the board appointments list. What you will see when you look at that is that this is the largest class that's gonna be up for reappointment ever. Because prior to Governor Evers coming on, the board rotated into 3 classes of 5. But when Evers came on, he said, yeah, we don't need to do that because that's no longer in your statute. And not since 1992. So basically what he said was, in 92, when we made the board go from 12 to 15, they took out the 3 classes of 5. Now, we did it as a matter of course, that's the way we did it, and the governors followed suit. But that's why this one is very, very front loaded with the number of people that are up for reappointment. And the reason for flagging it now is, as you're thinking about it, now's a good time to be thinking to say to the governor's office, I would really like to be reappointed. And we'll revisit that again in December so that you remember to make your messages known to the governor's office if you're up. But
So you give us the information of who we reach out to?
yes. And the last couple of times what they've said is just give us the list of who wants to. And we'll take it from there. So if there's a reason you want to step off, let me know. If you would like to continue, let us know as well, so that we can forward that message to his office and then they can get after it. Because I think after the last one, they didn't have to do a full request, which was wonderful. It was just sort of, okay, we'll just re-up these people.
And you see, everybody who's serving on the Arts Board right now has been appointed by Governor Evers.
The original.
Exactly, Jared was. So it does make it an easier process, or a different process, I will say.
Very good.
Okay, thank you very much, George. All right, let me scroll back up. And we'll jump into our next committee report, which is Budget and Finance. Is that John Johnson?
It is.
Mr. Johnson.
So on page 20, we start the budget. You've got in your board book on page 20 a brief overview of how it all works. George certainly is always free to really give a real detail, the real report on this. But basically, the state of Wisconsin in our final budget, each year the final budget, has since 2011 decided to match what the NEA provides and no more. That when the NEA increases their allocation nationally and for Wisconsin, then we get into a situation where the Arts Board, our executive director, has to go through DOA and ask for a joint finance resolution to increase to match the match. And so, as you can see here, in this biennium, it looks like, and we've been reported before from George, that they tried to match the match over 2 years. Now, the second year, we're now into the second year of fiscal year, that gets a little dodgy at times if the federal government had increased their allocation. It looks like we're really within $5,000, but that might be covered. So George, you want to speak to that part?
Yeah, sure. The amount that we got, there was an increase, was $5,000 specifically for Poetry Out Loud, which is a project the NEA has in states across the nation do, which is, they like to call it the spelling bee for poetry, right? So it's a competition of recitation for poetry. And so this year it goes from a grant of 20,000 with our partnership agreement to 25,000. And DOA has made it pretty clear that our match to that 5,000 will come from the salary supplement that we'll have received for fiscal 25. And just as a reminder, they supplement, DOA supplements the salaries of state employees. Anybody paid on the federal side comes from within our partnership agreement. But the state will increase, and that's how we get to the match.
So the 5,000 is covered without going to joint finance
Correct.
this fiscal year.
Two in a row.
Yeah,
Not
crazy.
I was gonna say that, which is the first time we have 2 in a row for running.
A long time.
Yes.
Since I've been on.
So that's the overview. You've got some particulars about how the NEA grant breaks down here. As to what different programs it funds. And then also certain things that we do from the state level. And then if you have really good eyesight, you can go into a further breakdown of state versus federal, and then it will on page 22 and page 23. And I'll just let George, if he wants to talk about any highlights from fiscal year 25. In that, otherwise, I will ask for a motion at some point after George finishes.
So, so this document is two things at the same time. One is the budget that the budget committee approved. So everything in the budgeted categories, the budget committee approved for recommendation to you today. And that was at a budget meeting on July 8th. So that's the first column you'll see. The other thing I wanted to talk about, the salary supplement, et cetera. New to this budget are the three things. One of them is we're doing the 50th anniversary grants again. So the committee recommends, and the staff recommended to the committee, that not only did we do the 50th anniversary the first time, but we'd like to do it a second time with these groups so that they lock in the fact that they come to us for this kind of not only grant support, but technical assistance. And you find that under the big category of creation and presentation. So it's not broken up separately.
And I think it's been great, if you look at the things that George has forwarded us, some of the social media posts of those who received grants, who had never received support from us, and their appreciation. So
the new position, we have the draft position with DOA. Now we're going through the draft job announcement. So not only is that now.
Jennifer, need to answer.
Oh,
Jennifer, can you silence the mic? For some reason, it gives us an echo. Thank you.
perfect. The new position, of course, was in the current fiscal year, so 2024, or the past fiscal year, I should say 24. It's in 25 here. And then the 5,000 increase to Poetry Out Loud. If you, as John said, if your eyesight is good, you're looking at these pages and you're going, wait a minute, I'm looking at folk arts and it looks like we're overspent $1,000 in folk arts apprenticeships. What that indicates to me is they took one of the grants that ended last fiscal year, that because we break those awards for apprenticeships, 2,500 up front, 1,000 when they give the final report. So whoever did their final report from last fiscal year got applied to this fiscal year. So we need to have them change that. Also, if you're looking, you eagle-eyed people, and you look at the state salaries, and the supplies and services, you'll see that we're almost all spent up in salaries, which makes absolutely no sense. We're only, what is it? July, August, September, we're three months in. So they've obviously misallocated the funds. And if you look on the federal side, there's nothing. So DOA misapplied in both of the instances. So I wanted to make sure you saw that.
It will be fixed.
It will be fixed. But as you see, basically the rest of it has not changed. I will once again say, as we always do, that operationally, the state pays for 3 staff and some of it's indirect costs, and that's it. Everything else is paid by the federal, including the new position, and more indirect costs, but the fact that we have phones, computers, travel to the state, all of those things are paid for by the federal government through our partnership agreement. So the budget is as proposed here. So the motion John's going to ask you for is just to approve the budget for fiscal 25. And then we'll talk about fiscal 24, where we are there, and lead forward to the biennial budget submission.
Can I just want to give Tyler some background of things. One of the things we just talked about, which was grants that we're going into a second year with. When the planning of the 50th anniversary celebration analysis was done on what communities had not received grant dollars ever to a degree, and some who had not for a very long time. And so it was identifying those and trying to figure out a way to reach into those counties. And so that we were really injecting funds into all 72. And so a concerted effort was made to reach out to arts organizations through partners within the community if we didn't know who they might be, et cetera. The Arts Board is very much on top of who is in the communities, but sometimes there might be new things and they've been around long enough, 3 years or so, to where that they have the ability to buy. And so this was money that the board had agreed to allocate to trying to reach into these communities to help spread the wealth and the financial part of the Wisconsin Arts Board's abilities. And so that originally it was supposed to be a one-time, one of a kind sort of thing. And I think due to the success of it and the way to try to build habit of continuing to apply and continuing to take advantage of the resources that the state provides. That in the long run, it's helpful to the organization, it's helpful to the community, it's helpful to the legislator in that area to better understand the work of the Wisconsin Arts Board. So when discussions come up about arts funding in the future, that they understand that their community has a direct impact in the decisions they're making from an art standpoint. So just so you had some better.
Yeah.
I just have a question. So you said they put the wrong numbers in the chart.
Right,
Who's they?
DOA.
they is DOA accounting. So
And we're gonna approve it like this?
you're approving the budget column.
Okay.
Now, the rest of it, you're not approving, that's something
Okay.
we're gonna go back and check,
Okay.
but how we've allocated the dollars to say this is how we're going to spend.
That's what we're approving. Okay.
So John, do you want to make that
Yes,
motion?
so, if we have discussion concluded, I will make a motion to approve the fiscal year 25 Arts Board budget.
I'll second.
Wonderful. So we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank
And
you
was
very
that
much.
Nora who made the second?
Richie.
Richie, Lynn Richie,
Thank you.
sorry. One thing, so Tyler, so you know as well, if you make a motion or a second, please say your last name. So, motion by Johnson or. So we state our name.
Let me, just say one concluding remark is, I was subbing in here for John Potter, so, you can report back to John Potter, any of the foibles and problems I did.
You did an excellent job.
So there are three things left to talk about in the budget space. One of them is fiscal 24. When last we were together, we said we were gonna go to DOA and request an extension for the past fiscal year, specifically because we have the 50th anniversary grants and we need to spend those out, and technically we would have been done and we couldn't have done that. So the NEA has granted that extension through December of this year. So we'll be able to spend those dollars as we planned to, and they understood why we were asking for extension. As we look at the biennial budget, the 25-27 biennial budget, so you'll recall we've talked about before that now Monday, September 16th, there will be a submission for the biennial budget 25-27. This is the moment where we considered that we would ask for more money. What we've been asked to do is to follow the rules and make the request as has been outlined by the governor and DOA. So our request will be essentially a 4% increase to match the NEA. So DOA has put together the explanation for the governor that we know the NEA will go up in the coming years. What we don't know what those numbers will be in 26 and 27 because they don't know, they're not there yet. So the best estimate from DOA is to increase 4% in each of those fiscal years. So that will be part of our budget submission to the DOA. Otherwise, whatever they're doing for salary, cost of living, those kinds of adjustments, they'll be doing as well. In addition to that, we are continuing with, between the Budget Committee and the External Relations Committee, the conversation of what is the increase to be requested Should there be additional hours available, and should we be asked about that? As we know, $100 million is what the governor proposed last time. We also know that, $1 per capita is what this board has been talking about for the longest time. We do know also that $1 per capita, you know, the population as explained by DOA to NASA, the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, is we're roughly a 5.9 million person state right now. That's our population. So $1 per capita is $5.9 million. And as John Johnson has pointed out, of course, we're talking over the biennium, so that would be the same number in each of the biennium. Having said that, if the governor were to do the 100 million, you must realize that it's about the same amount ultimately, because if you put 100 million in the bank and you're earning 5% interest, it's about $5 million. The difference between the two exercises is if you got the $1 per capita, it'd go right into the art board budget and could be spent immediately. If you do the other, here are the things you have to do. You have to empanel the foundation, so they have to pick the other board members of the Artistic Endowment Foundation. Administrative rules would have to be made. Interest would have had to be earned, so rather than being available on July 1st of 25, the earliest it would be is July of 26. So, the governor's office knows of the interest informally of the Arts Board to have an increase. Again, we will revisit this as the fall goes on, because as a reminder, the governor will take this moment from September until January of next year to craft the actual budget. Within that timeline, Fiscal Bureau will reestimate how much money will be available for the biennium, sort of projecting what they will have received in taxes. There will be an election somewhere during that period as well that may change the complexion of the legislature and change the political nature of that as well. So there are a number of pieces along the way that will inform what we can do for requesting additional. So I wanted to make sure that that was out there for you all to know about. Also, you should know that I didn't mention, there is as there always is, the downside exercise. So not only were we talking about 4% up, but then they say to you, so tell me what you're gonna do with a 5% cut. Once again, the Arts Board has decided to try to give up the $20,000, which is simply spending authority for the Art and Craft Fair Directory, which we have not done since 2013. It's still on our books. It's not real money, it's spending authority. But if we give it back, it's real money to them. We've tried to give it back before, nobody seems to want to take it. So we're gonna try again, we're gonna try to give it back.
George, can I just ask? And maybe it's not reasonable, but is there like, would there be any organization that would respond to an RFP to put together Arts and Craft Directory for $20,000?
I don't know that they would do it. I don't know if they would do it for 20. We did work at one time with Turner Media, who did a museum guide like that, and they needed to go out and sell ads. So that what they basically did was go to the different museums and things and set up sold ads in addition to the listing. So if it went out into the private sector, they would want to make it out. I mean, I can't blame them to it, but I don't know that 20 will get it done. And if you don't have it to give.
Well, and I just think there's a workload. Well, wouldn't we be able to, after $20,000, we wouldn't be able to spend it through an RFP?
The only reason we have it there is we used to take in money for the listings. So we would gather that money, and so then we'd have authority to spend it to buy
It's
the
like program revenue that we would get in.
So there's no real money there.
Gotcha.
I think it would be a lucrative thing for somebody if they wanted to do the private sector, because for us, it was always both an art and craft fair directory and a tool for artists' business development. Because it listed the kind of fairs and festivals, what kind of art they showed, a cost to get into that particular fair. So I know that at least one year when I was at Governor's Conference on Tourism, an artist came to me and said, I really love that publication, because when it comes out, I sit with it and I plan on going to visit you. So it was quite literally a business development. But I can tell you very clearly, it would have to be somebody else. There's no way. We tried that when we had people in the house that could do it. Then tourism took it on and they just went, it's
After what, 2 years?
2 years. Yeah, it's 2 years. So yeah. So I mean, if you know of anybody who's an entrepreneur and wants to pick it up, we'd be more than happy to help them with that. Looking here, and at this point, I also wanted to mention the survey. You've seen the survey, you've seen the results. You will soon see the great work that Brian's interns did to take the survey after Mary Reinders made the great suggestion of cross-tabulating the survey. His interns really did a great job in doing it, so you'll see that very soon. What you have heard me say over and over again, if you've been here, and for those of you on the screen, there are 3 things that rose up in the survey as we talk about why do we need more money for the arts. We have been very clear in stating to everybody who would listen, being 49th in the nation is no longer a valuable tool, because people look at that and they are unshamed by it. So legislators are unshamed by the fact that we're 49th in the nation. So the question in the survey was, if we had more money, what would we need it for? 3 things rose up. Staffing. We don't have enough people. We can't pay them what they deserve or give them the benefits they deserve. And by the way, we had a really interesting side conversation about that yesterday in Washington. And the new staff that we're hiring in are not working like the old staff that are retiring. So meaning they looked at those veteran staff people who were working 20 hours a day and said, I'm going to work hard for you, but I'm not nuts. I'm not doing that kind of thing. So it's another additional stressor in staffing. Secondly, it's about material and service increased costs. So increased costs for materials and services. Please don't ever use the word inflation. The politicians are triggered by the word inflation, but they don't mind the words increased cost of materials and services. And the third thing is we need sufficient and reliable funding. So they're not saying we need all the money in the world, but they're saying I need sufficient funding. What we're doing right now is insufficient, as we all know, and we need it to be reliable. So if we bump it up, $100,000 a year in a year, and then we go crashing back down, that's not helpful to anybody because they can't plan, they can't think of it. So those, when we talk about the talking points, those are the things we're talking about right now, specifically to audiences who will listen. We made that case, for example, at the Rural Creativity Forum in Osceola a week or so ago. Made the case yesterday during our town meeting. So a lot of those kinds of conversations, and people are going, they nod their heads affirmatively. Yes, of course we need staffing. Of course we need to deal with inflation. Of course we need sufficient and reliable.
And just a side note, knowing that we're live streaming on YouTube and we tend to, in this group that has worked together for some time, use shorthand. So just to clarify that, when George quoted the, "Are you nuts?" Please understand, people who have been dedicating their lives and their careers to working long hours to make amazing things happen are very respected. Absolutely, there's no question about that. And there are people who are saying, that's not gonna work for me. More balance in my life is what I'm looking for.
And I shorthand that because I'm one of those people. So when I say, "Are you nuts?" I'm looking at myself in the mirror. So that's part of it. So any questions about the biennial budget 25-27, the request, the down the road thoughts and requests about additional money.
So when is this request gonna be made? And is that something we talk about now or wait?
So.
Because yesterday when you were bringing it up, it was like everybody's eyes lit up, like, yeah, $1 more per capita, that'd be amazing. But that also sort of raises people's hopes and it may not happen.
So what I would say to you is external relations is gonna take the kinds of things that I just said about talking points and work through, we're getting to the external relations report, so I won't cut into it, but we'll let Chella and Ryan and others talk about what it is we're gonna go into that space. But it's not now, but it's between now and January. The other thing that to build upon what you said, what has been said very clearly is in the governor's office and others, we want to hear from people. We want to know what they think about what should happen in support of funding the arts. And the more contact they get, they basically put it on a spreadsheet and say, okay, what issues are arising? So that's another reason why external relations will work with us to get information out into the marketplace. And I know that Ann Katz is out there somewhere on YouTube and Create Wisconsin will also be out there helping people to understand the issues and make the connections with legislators. So that's coming between this period of September to January. You'll see it coming.
Right, and then at the December meeting, we're gonna clearly have a much stronger understanding of what we've asked for and what we're asking of our constituents and potential board members of going out. And when the Joint Finance Committee starts their roadshow of testifying in support of this, then we look to you as private citizens to go out and advocate for the budget that the governor has put forward and to talk about why it's important to you and your community.
So that's the increased question. And then finally, in the budget section, it's time to write another NEA grant. And God bless Karen, she's gonna do that again. And they've only made it easier and harder at the same time. Because they said, okay, we're gonna make it easier on you. You're only gonna have to write 3 pages narrative. And we were already having a hard time getting into how many did they used to give us?
11.
They used to give us 11 pages. Now they're saying, here's 3, go ahead and tell us what you do. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge, but
AI will help you.
it will. Chat GPT article, and the deadline for that is,
For me, it's October, for us, it's October 1. October 10 is the date on the calendar. It is also the date of our creation presentation grant application. So people are coming in with narrative questions, et cetera, et cetera.
and the only last point about the submission for our partnership agreement is that this year, as a special part of the award, they've set aside money for the arts and healthcare, as Serendipity would have. So this is part of the NEA Chair's Healing, Bridging, Thriving efforts to get across government, so not just the NEA, but health, transportation, et cetera. And so you may apply for between $25,000 and $75,000. And we'll come back to talking about social prescription later in the meeting. But because we have that project going, it's our intention to apply for the full 75. And see where it goes from there. We'll go back to social prescription later in the meeting.
A couple notes to add there. They used to allow us, every state had the option of applying to cultural traditional arts if they wanted to. There was an additional 2 or 3 pages allowed for that. Now it's integrated into the main application and every state will or will not include information. If you do, great. Figure out how to put that in those 3 pages. And they have not reduced the questions that they're asking. So they're looking for snapshots. And they say, if you really need 5 pages, then take 5 pages. So, and you have an extra page for the healthcare piece, which is awesome. So we have 6 pages and we'll use haiku as needed. But honestly, it's a great reminder of what our applicants get to deal with when they
Exactly.
put their world into that period of time. We don't ask as many questions. And so we'll be encouraging them to maybe reconsider some of the questions that they ask us as time goes on. The other piece is that it used to be on a 3-year, full year application and then 2 interim applications. It's full year from here on out, which is fine. They changed their panel system. There's a reader system, so we'll see.
So you get to do the full year every year. Correct.
All 3 pages or 6
Oh,
pages
sure.
or whatever.
It became very confusing to people as to where they were on the cycle. Sure. And so this just levels it out and everybody's always doing the same.
Right?
So that's it. That's all the budget conversation.
Any questions? Comments, concerns? Overwhelming, exasperating sounds? Hearing none. Thank you very much, John, for stepping in for John. And we will move on to Chella, talk about external relations.
Yes. Hello, everyone. So just reporting out on the exciting work the External Relations Committee has been doing. So we've been meeting about monthly since February to really look at the role of, this committee, really designate the work that we want to take on. So I just want to give a quick shout out to the members. I know it's a very popular committee. So Jane, Karen Ann, Dinora, Brian, Matt, and John Johnson. And then obviously staff members that really lead in the direction of, making sure that we're connecting with the issues that are relevant and that are pressing. I think that all the conversation about the budget that we just had really puts it in context in terms of the urgency and the need of, the opportunity that we have to really connect the figures and numbers with really the human part of things, which are the stories and the impact. So I just wanted to also, bring attention to the fact that, we really look to the field to collect these stories. So we took some time to harvest some of those stories, really, to this idea, that as one thing that we knew is that we will be asking more money, but we are doing our due diligence to really contextualize what that means for the different organizations that we serve. So with that, we put out a survey that went out to all of Wisconsin organization, individual artists as well as organizations were able to participate in it. We had 109 responses to this survey. And is this the correct figure? Just want to make sure that I got the right number. I think so, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think that not only was it just, sharing and completing the survey, but it was really paired with the opportunity to have follow-up conversations with Wisconsin Arts Board staff to dig a little deeper into, those questions that we were asking. So from there, we were able to have, all this data. So staff took a first punch at trying to summarize this. We were able to get into like 7 big buckets of what we were seeing themes throughout, as a starting point. So as the committee continued to meet, we were like, okay, well, we kind of need to further narrow down the focus of this because, to the questions that have resulted from the conversations with the budget conversations, we want to make sure that we are as best prepared to really have the talking points that we want that first of all reflect the needs of the field, but also, the place that we want to go, as an organization. So taking, the initial first draft of that, the committee was able to also add to what that was looking like. I think George brought up the 3 salient points that really arose. And we had the opportunity to Brian offered some of additional staff. So I just wanted to also shout out Thompson Scribner as well as Gabriela Sucros that also assisted in helping us further summarize the takeaways. So in the committee, we have very clean cross analysis of what this iteration means. So right now we're looking at the insights that we are really looking and anchoring all of our, further conversations. And especially as we get to kind of craft, what the asks are going to be with the conversations with, the legislation and the governor's office. the newest iteration of this analysis really broke it down into 3 disciplines. So we have the analysis through the lens of theater, analysis through the lens of music, as well as the analysis through visual arts, whether that's individual artists or organization. So through that, we revealed even more things that are reaffirming, things that we heard, throughout the different conversations that we've had in our 50th celebratory year when we're, out there with organizations and folks, letting them know, what is the work that still needs to be done. Not only did we break it down into like the different disciplines, but we're also looking at the needs, seeing if there's any trends, from geographic location, just making sure that we identify anything that's unique challenges, as well as any insights that are not only for geographic location, but specific regions. So part of that report really breaks it down into, the Wisconsin being divvied up into, those regions. So I think for us as a committee and, and the work for the board to continue on, as we're looking for next steps, and to address, Dinora, your question about timeline, we're submitting the fiscal budget stuff. That deadline is around the corner. That has, that's going to be taken care of. But I think to the point of, the narrative that really will convince people, I think we are adapting the $1 per capita as our slogan to really, push as an easy way to get that ingrained into the legislators that are making these decisions. One of the things that we are doing is just making sure we narrow down what those key points. Important part of that is going to be how we reflect that into the one-pagers. I know from the beginning of this committee, we really looked at, the value added that this tool has, not only for us as, board members, but really as, advocates of what it means for, I think we have a good idea of what the field is telling us. And this is an opportunity to really mirror those results to the folks that, may or may not be as connected to the folks and organizations that, are in the struggle, are in the fight, and are really hopeful as to what this opportunity can mean for, our state. So as far as timeline for us, we hope to have the one-pager layout done by November, so that we can use December data to just update what that's going to mean and be ready for release in January of 2025. It really aligns into the legislative calendar, to make sure that we're connecting with legislators that are already, in place, and also the new legislators that are coming on board, for this new political cycle. The last portion of this conversation, and, to George's point that he brought up earlier, is that, we're hoping to connect with the work that Create Wisconsin and NCATS has been, doing from a legislative standpoint. I think that there's definitely some synergies that can happen. I think that, just kudos to us for creating the space to be able to, connect with the folks that have been plugged into, the Wisconsin Arts Board. And I think that that's a very important opportunity that we were able to give ourselves, because now we actually have stories, we have names, we have, that narrative that I think really humanizes, what the work that we are doing. So, more to come on that. And the committee, I know that it's an opportunity for us to be very involved. And I feel that this committee is, really connecting the pieces from the logical number side to the importance of, the stories of the folks. So hopefully I summarize the work that has been done. I know there's tons of questions, so I just want to make sure we open up for some time with that. And George and staff and committee members, feel free to chime in.
Hey, Kelly, just so you know, Kathy Lang, who served on the Wisconsin Arts Board, was able to come out and have dinner with us on Thursday evening, and she's the one who laid out and worked very closely with Dale on the one-sheeters. And she is willing to offer support again, which is wonderful, or any of the data points. And there was sometimes a struggle in working things in, as well as another individual who is willing to assist. So we'll make sure that I would love to be able to engage. This is part of engaging former Arts Board members as this longer discussion point of having this, not losing the the institutional knowledge of a board member as they go off in political cycles, or with shifts in their work cycle, et cetera. So it's great that he's going to do that. The other thing I have that I want to talk just ever so briefly about is the survey that Chella was discussing. Because the reason I had, and I will say volunteered, because I did volunteer Thompson and Gabriella to look at the survey results in Excel, is because they do not have any bias. They have never seen anything like before. And I said, I want you to look at this data and tell me what you gleaned from it. I just want to know, but I want to see it by discipline and region. And so they went through, and you'll eventually see this, Chella has it, as well as staff, of just, this was the work that they had done, and they put a lot of time into this, and I was very happy because it's a great non-Peninsula Players portion of their internship, but such a critical piece of doing data analysis and things they were interested in from an arts admin standpoint. So I'm thankful to the Arts Board for enabling them to take a look at this and to provide some insight to us. And once you see this, and depending on where you are on the stage, you'll get a better understanding of the respondents to the survey from your region, what is important to them, and it's not always the same in each part of the state. So it's very interesting.
So Brian, two thoughts on that, Jordan, just jump right in. One is thank you for allowing them to do that, which was critical work, and that was awesome. The other piece, Chella, is that when Kathy raised her hand to help update, make it prettier, whatever, the one shooters, she said she was remembering working with Dale, so Dale, heads up. The critical piece to make everyone's lives easier is to know exactly the data points that you're asking for before you ask Dale to pull that from the database. There's lots of different stuff, but there are different. Our Pearl database is awesome and wonky, and so you can't pull across years all at once. You have to go in each time. So just to be really clear before the information gets pulled out, what exactly you're looking for.
Thank you. Any questions, external relations? Chella's done an amazing job in keeping the momentum moving forward and keeping our feet to the fire, and thank you very much, Chella, for doing that.
I have one quick question. We have dates set up for next meetings?
For external relations,
Yeah.
Well, they're usually the second Monday of the month. I think that's the cadence that we've been sticking with, and it's been working for the most part. I know we ran into some struggles between August, September, but hopefully we'll get into that. If we choose to follow that, I think the next one would be November 11th. So that might be a date we throw around, but we can definitely follow up with, what that looks like based on the workload, ahead for this quarter.
Back until October. No October?
are you interested in October 14th? You know what I was asking? She would
Oh
like
my
to
God,
do.
did I miss October completely? Look at me.
It's okay, Denora is gonna have a wonderful presentation at that one on the work that.
Did you say 11 o'clock? When does that happen?
Yeah,
It's not. 11
11
is great.
o'clock. Yeah, we can
You
we can meet on Indigenous Peoples Day. That's perfect.
Is that a day off? Take government? Just Illinois? Not even when it was. Even Illinois. And it's a very busy weekend in Door County.
So we're talking 15th then?
14th,
Monday, October 14th.
Monday, October 14th.
And November 11th.
Yes.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Hearing none, there isn't a full report from the Strategic Planning Committee, but I am very happy to report that John Johnson has agreed to take over the work that Mary Reinders had so wonderfully done. And John and Karen will work closely on this, and the committee that you have a good committee as well. So that we can keep moving forward with the current strategic plan as we go to the next iteration of it.
Maybe Karen, we can talk for a few minutes next week.
That's good.
It's in Granby.
And just so you know, we got information, as did everybody in the world, that Seth Godin's got a new book coming out called This Is Strategy. And he offered a bundle, that would encourage people in, 1,000 people could get it. And so the Arts Board is one of the 1,000, and so in the bundle comes a book, 7 copies of the new book, which will come in about 5 weeks from now. So the committee will have that book at least to inspire their thinking and conversation. So,
Excellent. All right, we will move on to the ad hoc committees that we have, and we will begin with the Access Committee and Bill.
Yeah, so we had a meeting in August, and there were 2 things that really came up. One of them was kind of a continuation from our last board meeting where we got into some discussion about ad hoc versus standing, and we got into some discussion about the definition of what this committee is doing. We sort of ran out of time, so I want to pick up on that a little bit. Before I do that, the other thing that we talked about was grantees having to do, maybe not an audit, having to do a reporting at the end that the NEA is requiring if we do get audited. So Dale had a sort of platform or whatever that they could use that wasn't the NEA, which apparently is not that user friendly, or very, very broad and not very specific to the grants. So I think we're kind of waiting to hear back if that other method of reporting on their accessibility compliance or what they're actually doing on that would be acceptable if we do get audited. So that's one piece we're working on because we want to make sure that we have all those things in place so that if we do get called for an audit that we're required to have this information. So we're still kind of working on that and waiting to hear from, I guess, the NEA on if they are going to accept that other way of reporting. But the larger thing was, you know, our committee has been meeting quarterly for the past year. And there was lots of work that went in before that. It was on hiatus for a little while. But we've been picking up steam and getting things rolling again. But we're really looking for some direction from the board on what are we supposed to be doing and how do we define what this committee is. The working sort of definition that we had was the accessibility committee shall work with staff and constituents to address specific issues surrounding access to Arts Board programs and services for people with disabilities, people of color, people in rural areas requested by the board. Now, there was a lot of sort of comments on, well, who are we leaving out, and you know, how does that definition really work? And one of our committee members, Christina Martin Wright, had a really good way of putting this, I think. She kind of distilled it down to, you know, accessibility is about removing barriers. That's what's really what it's about. And so those barriers could be physical or personal, you know, so like ramps to get into a place where you physically couldn't get in with stairs. It could be things like ALS at a performance to communicate what's happening on stage or another way. It's also things like website widgets and that kind of stuff, which we've already kind of worked on. ADA and other accommodations that we've also worked on, at least for the Arts Board site. So those are kind of physical and personal barriers in the terms of the bigger picture accessibility. But then there are other barriers that might apply to some groups, to a particular group, but not necessarily all people in a group. So examples would be rural people. Just being rural doesn't necessarily mean that there's a barrier. Now, there might be a barrier, but it's not like a physical barrier where I can't get into the space because I can't get into the space. There's plenty of rural communities that have robust art programs. I mean, I think of locally by us, Mineral Point's a big one. You know, there's plenty other around the state. So just being rural doesn't necessarily mean that there's a barrier to you accessing the Arts Board services and grants. But it could also be economically disadvantaged people. It could be young and old people. It could be LGBT people, indigenous people. So those aren't always groups that are necessarily have barriers in the same way like a physical barrier is. So one of the things I think we need to think about is having these two different ways of looking at this. Because the physical ones and all the ADA and all that compliance stuff is a little bit ongoing to stay updated with what the NEA wants for like website compliance and all those things. So that's kind of something that's kind of always going to be going on this committee, I think. And then when you get to the other barriers that may apply to some and not to others, that seems like a little bit more specialized and ad hoc within the work of the committee. So we're trying to figure out, like, you know, on the second one, how do we determine where the barriers are for these people in the groups? And then what are the groups? I mean, the groups could be a lot of things. I mean, I just listed a few, but they could be anything that's not outside, it's outside of that physical, personal barrier space. So we're really trying to get some feedback from the board on what our direction is, and you know, is this meant to be a standing committee or not? I think from my perspective, the physical and personal barriers, you know, could fall under a standing committee's sort of mandate. And then the other barriers, you know, could be addressed when those things arise, you know. So someone in a certain group says, hey, we don't have access, or we don't feel like we know how to get to the arts board and use the resources there. And then we could individually target those sort of specific things, whether it's a location or a group, rather than trying to broadly say everyone in the rural sphere in Wisconsin somehow doesn't have access, even though they may in certain situations. So we're really trying to define what this committee is supposed to be doing. And if it's a standing committee, what's our actual mandate and what are we supposed to be working on? Because right now, after a year of doing this, we're feeling a little bit like we're just meeting and we're just sort of chit-chatting and we're talking about some things, but we don't know what to sort of dig our traction into. So I'm looking for some guidance on that for sure. And then the other thing I think too is this whole thing of defining what we're supposed to be doing and how this is structured would be a really great thing if it is going to be a standing committee, because as committee members come and go, we'll have a framework for them to pick up on and to work on and step in and go, okay, now what do I, instead of, stepping in and going, now what do I do? Because I don't know what's happening. We don't quite have a full framework, and then starting over again. It'd be really good to start sort of top down, define what it is we are and what it is we're supposed to do, so that we have more smooth transitions over time as more committee members come on. And so I want to open that up to everyone else for discussion on those, especially the concept of those two different types of barriers and what you all think about that idea. Just kind of starting point, because I think that's the first structural thing from my perspective that we need to kind of figure out as we're determining whether it's standing or ad hoc and what we're actually trying to do for our goals.
I think it's our hope that if this is a standing committee, it's important enough to be a standing committee, clearly. But I think as we determine what that is when we do bylaws revision is the work you're talking about. And I think it's important that all of us remember here what our sphere of influence is within that realm. But more importantly, what our capabilities are within that, with the limited staff and board time that we have, so that we do not paint with broad or too fine of brush strokes to box ourselves in. So it's a very interesting place to be right now, and I think it could be taken many different places. And I think being mindful of where it starts with the flexibility of growth and expansion it's probably the healthiest way to approach this moving, but I leave that to you and your committee.
I think it was really wise the way that you divided these two sections of what accessibility means. My only concern is to think of the structural as the standing committee and the other as, well, when it comes up. Because when I've had the experience as a reader and I see accessibility, I'm thinking of the other, not just, because I know that we're, hopefully we are dealing with the structural on an ongoing basis, but yet we're not necessarily dealing with the other on an ongoing basis. And so then as coming from that point of view of the reader, it's very confusing. What does that accessibility section mean? Right? So if our own committee doesn't know what that is, it's also, I don't think we can make it very clear to people who apply, to people who read, to decision-making process. So I think it's really wise that we've identified that. I think that the conversation has to happen Because it began to happen at our last meeting, and because of time, we sort of tabled it. So I wonder if it makes sense to have sort of a meeting, not at this, in this moment, set up a date to meet and really flesh it out. With the knowledge of the older members, older not by age, but who've been in the board longer, with your wisdom and knowledge of it, and with our staff to give us an idea of what can and cannot be done, so that the wording is correct and clear and useful to everybody involved.
Yeah, and I think too, like, I'm fully cognizant and aware of like not putting things onto the staff. But we're just looking for guidance and direction, because one of my challenges too is, we've got about 2 committee members who are regulars, and then we have a few who kind of jump in every once in a while. And I should, like we all probably well know, like keeping people engaged in volunteer work, they want to feel like they're doing something and they need to have something to work on. And so I feel like we don't know what we're working on. I want to, of course, recognize all the work that's been done so far, especially in terms of like the website and the physical audit and all of those kinds of things. We're, kind of keep, I guess, in a sense, we'll kind of maintain those as those, changes come and things need to be done in those realms. But other than that, like we're just sort of standing around looking like, what are we supposed to be doing here? And I think if we had something we could kind of sink our teeth into, it wouldn't be a lift for the staff. It would be something the committee can really kind of dig into. And with these other sort of other barriers, if we find something that we can, and recognizing that the committee, meets quarterly, we all have limited time as well. If we sort of start taking 1 or 2 projects at a time, that may also give an opportunity to engage other people in the committee who might fit into those, economically disadvantaged, LGBTQ, or whatever it is, to go, oh, that's kind of my issue. I want to come and join this committee. Because now it's like, well, why do you join this committee? What are you guys working on? Like, how do you get people motivated and keep them engaged? Because that's a big part of kind of keep any committee that I'm going, is like, you have to have something to work on.
Sure.
Dale?
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say that there are sort of 3 documents out there, or 3 thoughts that are out there that are in conflict, which is why we're having the conversation. So the first one is the access charge that you receive at the front end, which is, we said it's all about access for the physically disabled, right? So that was very clear coming out of the blocks. That's what it was. And then we rediscovered the language of the committee's description that broadens it beyond that, which is why there's a little bit of tension there. And the only other thing I wanted to add to that discussion mix is that mission statement. I asked Karen to pull it up because the mission statement deals with others that we are thinking about.
The Wisconsin Arts Board is the state agency which nurtures creativity, cultivates expression, promotes the arts, supports the arts and education, stimulates community and economic development, and serves as a resource for people of every culture and heritage.
And so that's the last piece. That is the other conversation here. Every person in heritage is everything else. And so as we think about the work of the Arts Challenge Initiative, as an example, is something where we reach to people of different cultures and heritages and raise up those expressions. So it's happening in other aspects of the Arts Board's work, not necessarily through this committee. I see Matt said something and Chella's got her hand up.
So, Matt?
Sure. Bill, I think all the comments that you made are completely fair. There's not a charge. Find yourself just sort of spinning at these meetings. I don't know that I'm the best person to give a charge. And I think maybe that could, it would be helpful for me if I knew what maybe some other state art agencies were doing with respect to their accessibility committees, or the functional equivalent of that. I'm also, I typically am the one in the room in meetings, outside of this context, but in other meetings that says the thing that others don't want to say. one of the struggles sometimes when we create committees like this is that it is very hard to disband a committee. Nobody wants to vote on disbanding the accessibility committee at any point. And so when you make it a standing committee, I think we need to be really sure that it has a charge that is going to lead to results. Otherwise, we're gonna have this committee. It's gonna be very uncomfortable for anyone to ever say, hey, let's just get rid of this committee. Because no one wants to take a vote disbanding the accessibility committee because that feels really bad. And so that's one of my concerns sometimes about moving into the standing committee space. If we don't have a charge and we don't know exactly what this committee is going to be doing, we just know that the ideas are good. There are lots of good ideas. We are not lacking for great ideas and needs in the arts. And so I just want to be sure that everybody's thinking through that we shouldn't just create a committee and hope that it works out. And I think the concerns that you raised are the concerns that I've had, which is what functionally is this committee going to be able to do with the limited staff resources, with the limited committee resources. I think it reflects fully on board if we bring together people from around the state or committee that doesn't have anything realistically to do. The website is great and the facility assessment piece was great. But I just don't have a great idea as to what this committee could do. And then the other concern that I have is that you expand it so broad that it includes every variable. Well, then what do you focus on? That there are countless barriers, right? I mean, you mentioned the rural one, and I would argue that implicitly any rural community has some functional barrier, even if they're well funded, even if it's been one point. It's just not the resources that Madison has. Consider that a barrier. Some limited on space. So I guess those are just my thoughts.
I think too, the first part of that, the physical and personal and the ADA and all those other things seems like an ongoing thing that a standing committee could say this is part of our charge. But there's, a lot of that work's been done and it's more sort of updating and making sure that, that audit part gets covered and the reporting part, but that's not enough to sort of sink our teeth into and say, okay, here's our project, let's go for it. So I guess one of the things would be, and to your point, Matt, yeah, there's barriers everywhere and that's a really almost as broad a term as accessibility. But if we could start to identify a few of those things and say, we've heard from this group that, or we know this group probably could use the arts board's resources, but they're not in the same way that like the counties, like in a way that's kind of what it is, right? The barrier is that either they don't know about it or they, don't have anything that aligns with what the arts board does. But we can identify some of those things that are the more nebulous barriers that certain groups might have. And the committee could know that, we could start to sort of formulate, again, I don't want to put that, this is not to be put on the staff, this is for the committee to do. Start to have some understanding of what we can come back and say, hey, look, this one group that, probably could use the arts board, or they're finding that they can't get the resources they want, or whatever it is. So I think the committee's really like sort of lost in that realm right there, like it's so broad and there's, are all LGBTQ people, have barriers in the arts? Probably not, in some cases, yeah, but in a lot of cases, probably not. So how do we define like what we're supposed to be doing within any of those, groups that I just mentioned as examples?
But you just gave a barrier within a barrier, because I guarantee you LGBTQ and the arts in the rural community have barriers against them.
Right, and that might be, yeah, no, for sure. I thought the same thing too, like, right, in certain places, it might be a kind of a double barrier,
Yeah.
right?
Joe. Sorry.
Thank you for that. So I just have three things. The first one is, I think to the point of, how do we look at this in a way that's really going to, first of all, lead to fruitful discussions that are relevant and timely to the work ahead of us. Just broadly thinking, just the fact that, when we think of accessibility and really how this is tied to just like, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, or the idea broadly. I think that this is really important work. So maybe as we're restructuring what that can be, kind of really looking into that. I think the role of the committee would really center on prioritizing what are those like buckets that we would be tracking, because accessibility can look very, very different. I think we just touched a little bit on intersectionality of what it means to be, part of multiple communities that have been excluded or, systematically impacted, by the way that, society is structured. So really looking at that, I think is going to be really important. I pulled up our strategic plan. We have one more fiscal year to go on that. And I think tying it to a lot of, the values and the core goals, I think that can really help inform, the work that can be done in that. Secondly, it makes me think of, okay, as we're kind of prioritizing what that work can look like, the next question is, how is that operationalized, for us as, the Wisconsin Arts Board? And George, you brought this up, you have the Arts Challenge Grant Initiative that really looks at organizations that are, BIPOC-led, serving BIPOC, populations, which I think is an aspect of accessibility of things. But then maybe, I don't know, is there other areas that we can expand that are paired with, funding or grant giving? I'm thinking of the initiative that Arts Midwest rolled out specifically for artists with disabilities. Like, is that something that we might be considering, down the road? What can that, our alignment of resources, whether it's, actual money or, trainings. I think that there's some space for us to look at what that can be, which brings me into my third point of, just tools that are out there that Bill can help kind of set the agenda of like the points for discussion for the committee. I know that NASA and the NEA put out maybe like 2 months ago through the Office of Accessibility, an amazing training that I think really looks at the national trends of, what NEA is really looking at, examples of organizations that are doing some work. So all of that just to say that there's, I think, very exciting space to be in. I think it's a time where, organizations at a national level are feeling threatened at the idea of even considering and having conversations just because of the political discourse that we find ourselves in. So, I think that this can be a really important opportunity for us to really, kind of go 10 toes deep into, what we value, what we really want to see, as an arts board leading these conversations.
Thank you for your time, Shella, and your input. Jennifer.
Hi, I love that last point about accessing the information from the NEA. So that is awesome. I also just wanted to say that talking about all this, starting from the beginning and everything, my understanding was that the initiative was kind of grew out of tourism's initiative to make the experience. No? Oh, Karen Ann is shaking her head. Okay.
No? Okay, so yes.
No, the roots of all this come from the NEA. Because when we think about all of this, it's the NEA and their access office and their requirements to us and their constituents. And yeah, so it goes back a long, long way, both within the arts.
So it happens to parallel kind of their initiative for tourism. They were making it more for physical access to, like, let's say national parks or state parks.
Absolutely. Yes.
If you look at the NEA's website, it says the Office of Accessibility, and I'm not saying these other groups are not important, but I'm maybe saying we start with baby steps and knock out kind of the basis of where the NEA is going, which is people with disabilities, older adults, veterans, and people living in institutions, right? Because we can't fix everything all at once. We have to like pick an area, focus, so I just think whether it's the board, we give our thoughts and somehow give that to the committee, or maybe we bounce that off the staff and see where the greatest need is. Also looking at the NEA materials like Chella mentioned, because it is a big task that the committee has been tasked with. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't think I necessarily changed the conversation in any way, but just something to think about.
That was sage advice, I think, important. John, did you have anything else? I'm gonna come to you after Karen, as long as you're happy.
Just to kind of amplify what you both, I think, have said, and that is you both referenced the NEA. Bill, we've talked about the NEA's resources too. Dale, heads up, we may be calling on you in a sec. But there's nothing to say that we couldn't have the NEA's, head of that Office of Accessibility check in with the committee, join you and at the next meeting and just kind of say, this is an overview of the resources that we offer. When we began this office, this was our mission. We were seeding and encouraging state arts agencies, and then beyond that, all of our grantees with these resources. And here are some state arts agencies that are also grappling with these questions right now, and this is what they're coming up with. And then to follow up with maybe an email to those folks at the state arts agencies saying, would you send a description? Because Dale, we may have this already, the descriptions of how they define their accessibility committees and their missions. So I appreciated Jennifer's and Chella's note about the NEA's resources. I know you've been connecting with them anyway, Bill. So did I just say a whole bunch of stuff that you already know and are thinking about?
Not quite. I mean, connecting with them to find out more about what other agencies are doing is helpful. I think, trying to look at what the NEA does versus what our committee could do, or probably.
No, what the NEA expects of state arts agencies. What they originally envisioned when they provided that toolkit, and they have a bunch of resources that we continue to share. So let's ask Dale and John.
Okay, John.
And I echo, I really like that idea, and especially to me, it's what is the expectation in the NEA from the original and expectation of how we change for what states do around accessibility. I would just layer on, I briefly was on this committee when Leah was here with us, and there was a really big pandemic, et cetera. And I noticed from my professional role, there's been a big focus on internet website accessibility. And so that's something that I don't know if this, I know that we talked about it here, and there was some work done on the accessibility of the website.
Yes.
But that's something that we, as an organization outside of this work here, where I work, we continue to really keep focus on, because as you change apps, as you add different kinds of features on the website, et cetera, you have to continually look back at, is this website still accessible?
Yeah, I don't know, we actually have been doing that because maybe 2 meetings ago, Dale had some updates that got sent to the people in the state who do the website to fix some of the things or whatever. So I think that's something that's always going to be ongoing, is and as long as and align with that, letting grantees know that, like, here's information about accessibility. I mean, that's just kind of an ongoing thing, I think.
And maybe best practices for them in their website system.
Perhaps, yes. But I still think that doesn't give us enough to get everyone motivated on our committee.
I understand that. My not concern, where I think we need to make strides with this committee is you can't be the only Wisconsin Arts. If this is a standing committee, you're not the only board member on this, because it leaves you adrift with people who are not serving on the Wisconsin Arts Board. And I think any of our other standing committees are made primarily of Arts Board members who are reporting back and can help carry the load so that this doesn't all fall on you. So I would ask people to consider joining this if this is something where you have passion or experience or institutional knowledge, et cetera, to please reach out to me so that I can work with Bill from that standpoint. So as this continues to grow and expand, we do it thoughtfully and the right way. I appreciate the starting small and working out. I am a huge proponent of under promise and over deliver, because you're not setting yourself up for failure. I think Joe brought up intersectionality, which I'm gonna say as well, using it from the standpoint of Chella serving on NASA's board now can bring information into this board, into this area. Dale, who represents the Wisconsin Arts Board staff from the accessibility standpoint, as well as the resources within his peers to be able to reach out and figure out what's going on. And so I'm not going to advocate this become a standing committee at the December meeting for a bylaws change at the December meeting, only because if we're gonna ask people to serve on this, we need to ask them, we need to have a definition of what this is for us, and I'd rather us take the time to get it right than put the pedal to the metal and not know the direction in which we're headed.
So this is a question of the golden circles. The why, how, when, and we are trying to get to the what without knowing the why. So I would suggest that, to your point, if there are arts board members interested, the arts board members who are interested in this committee should meet with Bill and staff and talk this through, so we can develop the why. Because, you know, one why is because the NEA said so. I mean, let's break it down. That's the basic practical why. The NEA said you'll have access, and by that we mean, and you saw what they mean. So that's one. There are other barriers, there are other whys, and I think we need to have that full discussion. Because we've talked about getting people involved in the committee. Nobody's gonna commit to a committee they don't understand. Even the people that are on it right now are struggling to figure that out. And so the arts board needs to come back together, understand what it wants to say this is, and then go back out to the marketplace with what this is.
I think this is, the conversation is one that I would love for our December meeting, that it's standalone and we dedicate some time to.
Well, I don't wanna wait then. No,
Okay.
I want this to happen between now and the December meeting, so that when we come together in December, we're not saying, what is this about? Rather, this is what it's about, this is what we agreed to, and we can move
Do we
forward.
have, all right, so between now and then, we need to support Bill, so between now and then, if people can get to me, if this is an area that you have passion and even if you don't have knowledge, but are willing to gain knowledge, please speak up, send me an email. Don't do it in this space now, send me an email that I can get to Bill and with George, so that we understand the conversations that are moving forward, and so that Dale can be a part of these conversations as well. What is?
I'm moving out of the way so you can see it.
Oh, I see that she's there.
I just wanted to say, Bill, what is your calendar for the rest of September and October? Because Brian.
My September is pretty booked up. October is a little bit more open. But September is pretty shot for me right now. Be traveling and then I got a busy week after that.
And I just wanna make sure that everybody knows that we're not asking you to commit forever to the committee, but rather to the conversation about the committee.
So maybe a conversation at the end of October or early November before the December board meeting?
Yeah, and if, you know, there's just even just spitballing thoughts like, hey, you think about this thing, you know, I think the more we have of those kinds of things that we can start to say, okay, what do we want to focus on? And how we structure this, is really important as we move forward. And I'll certainly look at the NEAs, the things that Chella had brought up too, and just kind of see what I can glean from them and think about how that might work. But any other, you know, thoughts on who and what, you know, could be affected by this would be helpful too, as we start to just sort of define what it is we're trying to do. Outside of like update the website and all those kind of things, which we just kind of know already, and that's kind of clear what needs to happen on most of those things. Although there could be more things that fall under that sort of, into that bucket, but yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I just think we need to define what the rest of the committee's mandate is outside of that basic sort of NEA requirement part. You know, is it just reaching out to as many groups as possible, with as much information as possible? I mean, is it that, is it physically, or is it really just focusing on one area at a time and trying to, you know, affect change in a certain area or not? I just don't think we know that.
You know what, I think what is great from a timeliness standpoint is that Chella, George, Karen, Caitlin, Dale, Brian, I'm assuming the staff, all four staff are at NASA. So there's a group of 6 of us who will be headed to Puerto Rico and with the other state arts agencies, and this can be something and that we can try to make roads in with other state arts agencies. So that we can hear what they're working on and what they're faced with. My point with December is still to allow time on the agenda to continue having this conversation so that we can, I'm not saying that work is not happening between now and then, but this is something that is a dialogue within the arts board, and we don't always have time for dialogue. We're doing such procedural things and going through that. I think it's an important one that we keep doing during our board meetings to help figure out what this is, and so that you don't feel cast adrift without a rescue vessel passing you. So,
I just put the chat up here for 2 reasons. One, to show that Dale's been populating it with some things. For those of you who can access the chat, and then for Dale to say, make sure that you capture those so that we can distribute those in email after the meeting. And Dale, anything you want to add to the conversation before we move on to the next agenda item?
I was trying to get to the NASA site for the conference because there's a pre-conference day on Wednesday that's dedicated to all of the state arts agency groups, and I don't have to be the only one in that. If anyone else going will be there that day.
Chella's just sent me an email who's interested in helping Bill on this and continue the dialogue. So I think we will definitely have people in that space with you, Dale.
Wonderful.
I'll just add real quick, I'm emailing everybody, but NEA in one of their accessibility planning guides has a list of like sample job descriptions, or I guess I'll say better funded arts agencies that have ADA type coordinators. I don't see any reason why we couldn't reach out to some of these organizations and ask just for their job descriptions, right? Even their position descriptions and what it is that they actually do. It might give us some better ideas of
Thank you.
functional items.
Do you have,
So if I, kind of do a little more research between now and our next meeting, and we could maybe meet additionally as well, and just have some ideas so that I can bring some things to the table with that, so we can start to talk about, rather than trying to hash it all out here, I'll try and bring some things in, from what all the references we've got today, and then see if we can't start to find our way through that, if that makes sense.
yes, 30 seconds or less. Can you bring up you just raised.
Oh, I think somebody already mentioned that if we could send all the links and information that are in the chat to us.
Excellent, thank you. All right, thank you very much for that healthy dialogue on a very important soon to be standing committee so that we can frame this for success. All right, Lynn, this is your final report as the chair of the 50th anniversary task force.
As we are now in the 51st year, we need to hopefully keep that timeline going so that the 75th year anniversary will have some base to start with. This group really did a great job pulling everything together, from Susan Lipp to Bill. Susan and Jonathan posting us, Bill doing the store. Everyone on this board that was there that helped set up tables, take tables down for the party, that was there to greet, yes, the cake eating at each different center that celebrated throughout the year, different areas. The final of online that was well attended, really nicely well attended. I think a lot was learned. I think people rejoiced in celebrating with us, which was wonderful. And so I just wanna, once again, I keep saying this at everyone when I bring this up. The group was wonderful to work with. Everybody did what they said they were gonna do, and they showed up and they helped.
You did an excellent job of keeping everyone on task, so thank you for your hard work on
Well,
this.
Thank you, but, yeah, I was really glad to do that. It was a fun project. So, yeah, I like parties.
Sure. Disbanding celebration, you are officially disbanded.
I can always once again say thank you, Susan, for having us to your place in
Absolutely,
October of last year.
absolutely.
Actually, one more comment, I will just say that even though it's the first year, we are still education celebrating with the continuation of our project on multiple levels of the arts, multiple types of the arts, with spoken word, with music, with music composed for the spoken word and for orchestra and chamber. So, look forward to that.
It's something we talk about a lot, but that partnership with DPI, with that project was awesome, and the fact that it continues is just a source of joy to lots of people beyond this stuff, so. Yay, that,
We
thank
need
you.
to start promoting the second
Yeah.
iterations.
I was just giving, it had reminded me, the task force, like, oh, I put a playbill in my backpack for George from our season. And we ran again the 50th anniversary celebration as a full page ad in it. And gave 2 pages up to the AEP 6 results for our area, so that the people who took the survey or our community understood the economic impact of the arts. And so that's the External Relations Committee in effect taking, well, putting data in front of about 36,000 people this year. So,
That's great.
thank you very much. All right. We will now move on to program updates and pass the time over to Karen with CNV.
Okay, CNV is live and exciting for many, and we're getting all kinds of organizations interested in applying for the first time. So we'll see how many of those manifest into actual applications. And that number will mostly determine how many applications the new CNP panel, new applicant panel has to look at on that day, separate from the full year applications, which this year come from multidisciplinary arts organization, visual arts organization, folk arts, folk and traditional arts organizations, and literary arts organizations. So those are kind of the 4 categories that we're anticipating the bulk of the applications from. Other than that, we'll see what the smattering of other disciplines becomes on October 10th, most likely. We orient the panel on the 11th of October. They get the link to those applications on the 11th. And so we tend to move really quickly, even though we try to build in more time. So, maybe we'll give ourselves to the 14th, but right now I'm anticipating they'll get the link on the 11th. And then they have them over a month with those applications. There may be more than 40, we'll see. And then they will meet in panel on November 21st or 22nd. I hope to hone that down by the end of next week, so that everyone can know what to plan for there. And yeah, there's the excitement for CNP is rising. I think for the last few years, people have just been kind of, since the pandemic, oh wait, this is my full year now, I haven't had to do a full year since the pandemic, oh my gosh, this is really hard, I'm done. And we had a number to sort of fall away or then come in the following year as new applicants and get back in the program that way. So I have a feeling that we are now starting the new 4-year cycle, and we're seeing people say, okay, we did our full year after the pandemic, or whatever. So we're feeling more secure in that full year application process. So again, we'll see what those numbers translate to.
Did you have anything where you wanted to add on the 50th anniversary grant, since we could touch on it a bit?
Did, yes. So the Zoom call that part of what we have done in getting into these 22 counties is spend a fair amount of time researching what nonprofits existed there, what 501c3s exist. In a number of counties, the libraries have risen to the surface, which is really great. we are reminded of what a critical part they play in a community's infrastructure, and health. And despite our best attempts, there are 3, potentially 4, because one has asked to, potentially 5, 2 have asked to defer their original project application to a little bit later in this fall, because they simply did not have the capacity to deal with it this summer. So we have 3 counties that didn't apply at all, this year, they just, for a variety of reasons, couldn't. And the second year of funding will allow them to have at least 1 grant through this, so thank you for that. And then the others, so maybe 5, and then the others will be going back and saying, here's the next application, and they will have more time to frame their projects and think about it and plan. I think we really catalyzed a lot of thinking and conversations, and we asked them for a very quick turnaround last spring. This time they're in the mode, they've all got their unique entity identifiers, which took months for some of them. It's an amazing process to get that, if you're a nonprofit. And so they're much more ready to come up with the next project or an iteration of the current project or something. So it'll be fun to see what comes out of the ones that have already gotten a grant from us and the ones that will be getting a grant, I hope, for the first time from us in this process. One of the pieces that I just wanted to underscore in this is in building the bridges. We talk about this a lot with the applicants. So we sort of brought them in by saying, hey, $2,500 to do whatever you're doing or whatever, and arts related. And then when we got them, unapologetically, I say, we said, oh, but wait, you also get an hour with us via Zoom, and our friends with Wisconsin Humanities, and our friends with the Wisconsin Office of Rural Prosperity. And oh, by the way, when you come to that Zoom call, when you're getting ready for it, invite everybody in your county that you think would want to know about these resources. People who are doing creative work, or people who aren't, but you think should, or, get your county people in, get your city people in, whatever, get your village people in. And I will say that a variety,
Not that
we've had,
much people though.
we've had, village people in, let's do it. And so we've had, so far, I pulled up the things I wanted to tell you, I think we've had 6 of the calls already. And, we've had a variety of responses from people for that invitation. And some people have just been able to just jump on themselves, and that's it. We talked to 1 person and we had a lovely conversation, 3 of us and the brilliant future center person. And then we've had at the other end of the spectrum, someone say, okay, I want to invite, and they give us a list. What do I say? And so we've been sending out this, why do we ask you to invite people? And then we explain part of the reason is to catalyze a lot more things happening in the community, or at least to let them know that we're here for them. And because we really are serious about building bridges over time. And so I hope that as the fall goes on and we have more and more of these conversations, we'll have more and more people jumping on those Zoom calls. But it has been a privilege to have just an hour to be with somebody from a county that we don't get to learn very much about directly, the 3 of us together, and to not pepper them with questions. We're really careful about that, but to definitely, put some resources in the chat and ask questions and find out what's happening in the different counties. We have already met with Calumet County, the Brilliant Nature Preserve. We have met with the Dodge County Center for the Arts. We have in Dodge County. We've met with the Friends of the Florence County Library. We have delayed our meetings with Artbeat in Kewaunee County and Tomahawk Public Library in Lincoln County for later in the fall. They realized they weren't quite ready to invite as many people as they wanted to. We met with the Blanchardville Library and Lafayette County, yes, and the University of Wisconsin Green Bay Marinette campus, their theater program, Theater on the Bay. So those are the conversations we've had so far. We're connecting with Marquette County later this month, and then the rest will fall as they do in October, November, December, and even one so far in January. So long-term investment.
Of the second,
And, well, why don't you talk about that? I've been talking a lot
All right,
on the
no
way up. This is fun.
On the way up, we stopped at the Tomahawk Library to check in on the librarian and talk about the project. And what's nice about it, first of all, is that the librarian is an artist herself. And so she talked about how the physical space transformed, and she came because color came to the walls. Posters were put on the walls, and so you could see a much more creative space. And she is an advocate for doing as much as you can to bring people into the library. Because I think prior to her, the aesthetic was come get your stuff and go home, you know. Now they're trying to get people in, and it's, of course, as always, Wind the Tune kind of stuff, that they're bringing in the youngest kids and the oldest adults to get them involved in projects. And what a beautiful setting, set on the river or the lake, which are on the lake there. And so it's a beautiful setting. They've just recently applied for a $4 million grant to do the basement. So they take the basement, which is basically storage for everybody down in everything, and make it into a really active, both archive and more useful space for library.
It was great to have that conversation. The only other thing I would say about the 50th is just these Zoom calls with humanities and the Office for Rural Prosperity. It gives us an opportunity to say, we're from the state, and we really are very well. I mean, and because there is sometimes a disconnect, and they don't feel like the state of Wisconsin has enough of a presence. So for us to say state level resources are reaching out to you, please let us know, we want to learn more. I'm learning that the Office of Rural Prosperity has an incredibly active and wonderful network of rural economic development directors, I think is what they call them, REDs. And so that's been really fun to hear about the resources. I know tourism has their regional tourism specialists, and I dream of one day Oxford having their own regional resources in addition to staff that's currently existing. Okay.
Thank you. How about Women in the Arts?
It is going on. I wish Caitlin could be with us. She says hello and sends her greetings and regrets not coming in person. And this is a good move to take the Woodland Indian Arts program and move the deadline, move that whole process into the quieter thinking months of most of the applicants' years and lives, and certainly easing up ours. So we're moving them to January and early February. And that will allow people to think about and then apply at a time when they're normally doing the quieter thinking in their artwork and their projects. So that's the big news there. Excited to see how that turns out.
Thank you. Jumping into old business, the chairman's report that I have, I want to start with it again. I wish you all could have been here for this meeting. I understand schedule conflicts, etc. But anybody who's in the room, is there anything you wanted to share about your experience? I'm thrilled that we had the opportunity to, since we do not have representation in this area currently serving on the Arts Board, but we were able to see Ruth, who formerly served on this board when we were at CBOC yesterday, and Sharon Stewart. We saw her there as well, but also had the opportunity to have supper with her last night. And Kathy Lang, we were able to have supper with on Thursday. So it's great being able to have those connections still in the community, and then seeing all of the various, the artists, the galleries, Big Top, and just all of the great work that's going on in this part of the state. Obviously, things get more spread out when you're in a rural environment. And so I'm sure we would love to have seen many more things. That is always the challenge with the time we're presented, but anyone have anything they want to share? Don't feel you need to, but you
This is
from
my
us.
area.
I understand. But yes, but I'm saying just, we used to have someone in Washburn.
Right,
This
which
stuff.
would be lovely again.
Yes,
You know,
because you're still, how long does it take you to get here?
oh, 2.5 hours.
So I'm saying that's
I'm rural.
Milwaukee to Western County, so this is.
I'm rural, it's a half hour to go grocery shopping, so, you know,
Let's do it.
yeah, 2.5 is nothing. And, going to Duluth is from Superior, but anyway, yeah, I agree, it was, I think we got so much good feedback, we learned stuff, they were willing to share, and it was, there wasn't one place that we went that I didn't think was amazing and worth going to. So,
I would echo that. I felt a vibrancy, I mean, in the conversation, and I feel that's why I come up here for other type of activities. There is really this like creativity cluster.
Yeah.
Up around here, which I love.
and you've come up for a long time, have you not seen it grow a lot in the last 10, 15 years?
Well, I think I said this to somebody yesterday, I don't have to chase little kids around or push a stroller. So in that sense, like my ability to see things has grown in the last 10 or 15 years. But I think you're spot on. I mean, we spoke about continuing that needs real estate support.
Yeah.
And it needs economic development support. It needs support for financially for economic development, also though for the arts, and also I'll add for education and the libraries. I mean, I was at the public library here in Ashland last year, and it's a beautiful building that was donated by a fantastic benefactor over 100 years ago. It is the oldest still in use library building in the state of Wisconsin. And they have plans for a wonderful renovation. Making that a reality is something that I've provided to just hearing about the Commonwealth Library, et cetera. But it's those kind of things that we have to be cognizant across the state in the big population areas to make these investments.
Thank you. Yes.
I was really struck by the conversation with April in terms of her ongoing interest in building the apprenticeship programs. And I think, you know, particularly when you're talking about a craft that died out and she's tried to revitalize, and I think clearly she would like to see that expand and continue. And I imagine there are many, many examples of that around this area where the support of the board or grants are so vital to the continued life of that. So I really appreciate that.
So, you know, April, for those of you on the call, is an Ojibwe basket maker, but not Ojibwe baskets. She is really self-taught and looking at how baskets and materials. She works primarily with black ash, and had received an incredible grant to give her office space within the downtown, well, just off downtown Ashland area. And she is putting it to amazing use, and talked to us about her apprenticeship program that Tyler had mentioned. And was asked the question, how much money would you really need to properly apprentice someone in this? And it was about $20,000, which I thought was very good for us to understand the apprenticeship grants were being given, and what the true cost of a true apprenticeship program to pass the knowledge on that she noticed was being lost or had been lost, and bringing it back and continuing it and pushing it forward. So it was a great opportunity to meet with her. All right, the other thing I have, oh, yes, Jeff.
She was really impressive. And
Yeah.
also the indigenous, indigenously focused art gallery. Was very impressive.
I was impressed by the fact that the gallerist was truly interested in the arts, in mentoring and raising the artists and helping folks realize they are in fact artists. That's just beautiful.
There was something beyond just a kind of gift shop gallery.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
where you just go and get something and then you buy a light off or whatever.
She was giving people agency.
Yeah. To the point that she didn't speak that much, she wanted them to speak. So it's just, yeah.
Okay, the other thing on the chairman's report, I think I've already spoken about is Nassau, that we will be headed to the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies in Puerto Rico. Hurricanes be damned, stay away during the time we're there at the end of October. And we will certainly report back on that at the December meeting and make the best use of that time as we can. All right, I'll pass it to George for executive director's report.
All right, so Arts Midwest, I listed here, and I just wanted to keep you updated that the nine state directors continue to work with Arts Midwest to develop the covenant between the state agencies and the regional arts organization. I drafted it with expert advice from our colleagues. It was given to the staff at Arts Midwest who reflected on it. We looked at their edits and gave it back to them. And now we're hopefully getting it to the point where it will not only define for the nine and the RAO what to happen, but will also act as a model for the other regional arts organizations across the nation. So that's exciting progress. Social prescription, the group that's been here has heard a lot about the fact that social prescription is something that we are working with as a staff. We were approached by First Stage Children's Theater and Children's Theater of Madison about this notion of social prescription, where a doctor might write you a prescription for your mental health or belonging or et cetera, for you to go to the museum or attend a show or take a ceramics class or whatever the case may be. This is a concept that grew in England and then was brought to the United States. Massachusetts is a leader in this space. And so they came to us because of our expertise in state government and that whole conversation. And so we've been helping to not only bring them together, but reach out to groups through MAT, through the Department of Health, and into the governor's office to make them aware of this project. The goal is to raise an amount of money that will bring Art Pharmacy of Atlanta to Wisconsin to work with healthcare systems across our state to introduce this concept and set it up on the healthcare system side, and then on the art and artists organization side, help them understand what this is all about so they can too benefit from participating in the social prescription. And so the current plan is to raise the money for that first blush to get started. The nice thing about it, it leads us forward from sort of the normal nonprofit of sitting in a room and having discussions about what would this look like and what could it be and all that kind of thing, to I know, and I have, meeting Art Pharmacy, I have this expertise, I can go in and get this set up for you in short order. And so given that we are able to raise those dollars, and by we, I mean our friends in the private sector, we'll be able to leap this forward very, very quickly. And that's exciting. There is some talk of money through the budget. One of the Milwaukee area legislators is very interested in this project and has been talking to the governor about it as well. But having said that, it's just an exciting project, and there are a lot of ancillary activities that come with this where people say, well, arts and healthcare, we got so much we want to talk about. And so these are great conversations. And as we said at the top of the meeting, the NEA, in some form of serendipity, put aside money for the arts and healthcare this year. So their timing couldn't be better for all of us, because not only will we need the money in the first year of the project, but we'll also need to raise the balance in the second year. So. And what we heard from people up here is they want to see what we showed you about social prescription, because they want to get it up to speed on what this concept is all about. So we'll be sharing that, both the guidebook for communities and the video. Right. Theater education, you may recall the conversation that said at UW Oshkosh, they had a faculty of 6, they had a major and a minor, and they had a number of productions, and that fell to faculty of one, only a minor, and the assumption that they do the same number of productions. Well, Karen and I have been working with our friends in the theater education space. We helped them create a meeting that was held at UW Green Bay in August, on August 3rd. And it was really representative of K-12 education, higher ed education, community theaters and professional theaters. So the importance of theater education was really evident. The need for making kids throughout the system aware of all of the professions in theater that are available. Also important because they and their guidance counselors and their parents and the schools don't necessarily know all the things they could get jobs in. And so when a kid says, I want to be in theater, they go, they'll never get a job. Well, that's not at all true. And so there's that level of situation. And third, it's how do we argue and make talking points about the importance of theater education so this doesn't spread to other campuses. We know already, for example, that UW Green Bay has given up its major in order to protect the theater department, at least in the short term. And the challenges that they all face is an administrator says, this is why we're cutting you. And they say, well, here's our creative answer to that. And they say, no, this is actually why we're cutting you. And they say, well, here's our answer to that. And so the goalpost keeps moving. Also important to the theater education piece is carrying this continually forward. And so the Alliance for Wisconsin Theater Education meeting is on Friday of next week. So the conversation continues there. As Karen, I think, mentioned during the time we were putting together, we've created an acronym list because one of the things that was clear is that we didn't all know the acronyms we were using for one another. So that's been good. We also need to define the universe. So for example, the Community Theater Association, I think, lists 8 community theaters. We know there are far more than 8 community theaters in the state of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So we need to define that universe because the other part of this conversation was the people in the room saying, man, this is important that we all got together like this. We should do this more often. They started leaning towards an organization. And I was like, oh, stop. No organization, please. But Cultural Coalition is not a 501c3, but meets quarterly and does work. The Partners for Arts Education is not a 501c3, but it's like-minded organization meeting every so often and doing work together. So that's what we're going to encourage them in this space. The Alliance for Wisconsin Theater Education could be the coalescing factor here, but they don't have to start. Anyway, it's an exciting thing because not only do we have talked about the theater education, social prescription came through that because we mentioned it there. Door County said, hey, we like that idea. So it's Madison, Milwaukee, Door County, Green Bay said, hey, we like that idea. The process said they like the idea. So through that meeting, not only did it deal with theater education, spread the word about social prescription. And then Alan Ebert, who's the head of Children's Theater of Madison, was at that meeting, heard some of what was going on in the environment and said, you know what we need to do in Madison, we need to have a meeting that brings together all of the arts groups because we're tripping over ourselves as we go to donors. We don't know when everybody's planning their things, you know, so Brian might come up with a project for youth and I might have a similar project I'm thinking about, but we don't talk to one another and whoever gets to the marketplace first gets. So on September 23rd, I will help them facilitate a meeting and a conversation about Madison coming together to have this discussion. The reason they came through us is to say, we don't have a dog in the hunt. In other words, we don't operate in Madison generally. Madison City Arts Commission Dane County or Dane Arts, 2 local arts agencies. Create Wisconsin, also does some work in Madison, so they came to us to sort of be Switzerland in the conversation. So we're doing that. Wanted to bring that to your attention. So I say, the conversation around theater and social prescription has really blossomed into multiple different directions. And finally, I'm gonna say this because I think it's really important. You've heard about the 50th anniversary grant. And Karen tells you about the fact that they're meeting with Humanities and with Office of Outdoor Rec.
No,
Yeah, that's, sorry, that's true.
I was like,
Yeah, right.
be interesting.
But the reason for me bringing it up here is to say, when we put it out there, we said, here's your grant, right? That's not where it stopped. And that's not where it stopped because Karen and Caitlin and their colleagues said, you know what would be cool? We could give them more than just dollars if we bring them together in this way. And so it's just, what it is both a blessing to all those communities and a workload challenge for the staff. However, they're giving again to community. So I just want to underscore that here because it's quite amazing, but it actually leads to the last thought I'm gonna have, which is the invisible hand. And this goes back to Chella, the external relations, and I sent you a message on this, but our friends at the museums have done a great job, and as you know, we brought them together to have their conversation about how they do their work and how they communicate with one another. Got them to the point where they could go to get a GEM grant from tourism. And then an article comes out, and it's about the museums, yes. It's about the GEM grant, yes. And there's no mention of the article. And so the challenge in that is, it's a reminder to us that in all this work we do, whether it's social prescription or any of this other stuff, we need to write the origin story from the outside. So in the case of the museums, we should have and now will write something that says, and the Arts Board brought them together in 2018 to have this conversation, which led to this thing. So that if I'm not around, this can happen, the conversation can happen. If Karen's not around, you guys are not around, the next generation will know the Arts Board. The other time that this came up recently was when we had the rural creativity meeting in Osceola. And shout out to Ann Katz who organizes that event. But they started talking about the film incentives and what's going on right now about film incentives. And then they sort of knew that film incentives had happened before, but nobody could speak to the history. And that's when they just basically turned to me and said, okay. But there again, if we don't know our history and we go running in to do things without knowing history, in the case of the Arts Board, we are the invisible hand. We need to do a better job.
You need to get a pair of fancy gloves to keep those hands covered so that people see those fingers moving and what's happening.
Even Michael Jackson gloves.
There you go.
Sequins and all.
Yeah.
I love that. What tool? Exactly, I read too.
All right, that's it. Any questions for George? All right, does anybody have any new business they'd like to bring to the meeting? Hearing none, is there a? Yes.
I would just like to say, if anyone wants to go back to the Black Cat, no, the bakery, turns out we followed up on Brian's and the board's awesome idea to do a yay, we did 50 years of celebration woohoo cake and forgot all about it. So it's sitting at the bakery. To eat, and it's stunningly good, I'm sure. So we're gonna have to go to the bakery right after this. Anybody want to join us for cake? Come on down. Anybody live streaming? 5 minutes.
Carrot cake or?
No, a lemon-based cake that is nummy and stuff.
Looks like John's here.
Come on, you can do it.
Thank you. for
Take
that.
some home for your family.
Yeah.
Oh, I did share the catalog for Raoul, I don't know where it is. And I shared an email with everybody with a link where you can actually read the document. Or if you want to actually purchase it. or like-
Do they know what you're talking about?
Oh, yeah, friends, so,
Yeah, take it around.
my husband Raoul Deal had a major, retrospective exhibit
It never came
in
from.
Milwaukee, and it's up at the Kenilworth Galleries in at GWF. It's beautiful. It's 35 years of creative life, and there's a beautiful catalog that's related to it. So I sent the link to the catalog, so you can see it. But it's open to the public till the end of September. And if you're interested in a guided tour, because I think it's interesting to hear more about the work, just reach out to me and I'll connect you with Will.
Did you send that via email?
I did.
Yes, you did.
Because I didn't get it for some reason. So I'm glad you sent it. And also,
So here's the catalog, so you have a. So visual, it's one of his prints.
Thank you for sharing.
So I just wanted to add on to Nora's a little bit in a way, like, I just wanted to say how appreciative I am of all the connections that I have with my Parks Board members, and that Rafael Salas is a juror for our national small work show coming up here in another month, so I really appreciate all the connections.
So we miss him.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move, Marquez moves.
Second, Mitchell.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You don't have to do.
I know we don't.
Say it right now.
He says yes.
You
Oh,
don't-
your way out of it.
Don't do a second.
You don't have to do the same.
Okay.
You have to.
That's.
Well, anyway.
Unanimous.
Non-voting